Hello, my name is Thayin and I like to experiment with AI art. This week Midjourney released a new update for version 4 and it completely turned everything upside down again. The good news is that everything looks even more awesome. The bad news is that you may have to discover your style again, because the same things don't work the same way as before. In this video I will be looking at the Midjourney version 4 update 1 default style, with different simple subjects to get a general idea of what it looks like. I will test all subjects with the same seed 777 and use different aspect ratios. So, let's get to it. Number 1. Sphere. From the very first look you can tell that there is an obvious difference to the previous version. Here you can see the two versions side by side. I happened to create a sphere with the old version of Midjourney version 4 and it looks like this compared to the new version. It did not use the exact same seed, but the difference is indeed noticeable. I really love the way these new spheres turned out. They're perfectly centered, some cool reflections going on, one is even in a desert. I also love how sharp these spheres are. Because Midjourney added in some additional aspect ratio support, let's take a look at that as well. Here's how the sphere looks with an aspect ratio of a portrait. Currently only 2:3 is supported for portraits. As you can see, the sphere does not look that great in the portrait size. The images themselves look great, but the clipping cuts off the edges of the sphere. And here is the example of aspect ratio 3:2, which is the only supported ratio for landscapes. These spheres look slightly better. The images still look great and sharp, but not all of them completely fit inside the picture. Some of the spheres are again cut off from the edges. The second image did turn out quite well, as in the sphere fits nicely in the picture, but to be honest, I like the look of the other spheres a lot more. When we look at all three aspect ratios side by side, we can see that they are similar. They all use the same seed after all, but it is obvious that aspect ratio does matter here and it makes the same image look different. Too bad it doesn't fit the sphere in the borders of the image with all the aspect ratios. So final verdict, if you want to create a sphere, you probably should use aspect ratio 1:1 for optimized results. Let's see what other prompts have in store for us. Number 2, landscape. There do seem to be some blurriness/graininess issues still with landscapes in my opinion. But there has been some improvement compared to the earlier version. Here are the old and new side by side again. Not the same seed, but you get the idea. The water reflections seem to be better and there is certainly less blur. But I do think compared to the spheres we saw earlier, this don't look as good and sharp. And again, let's also see the different aspect ratios. First, let's look at the portrait. Landscapes don't really seem to have as much issues with the portrait size as the spheres did. These look very nice, although the picture quality and sharpness does still need some improvement for the default style. And here is the landscape in landscape ratio. It looks very nice. Based on these images, I would say that landscapes do look better in landscape format. The reflections in these images look very clear and sharp. There does seem to be less foliage in these images, maybe that is kind of making the images look slightly better. Here are all the landscapes side by side. There is a slight variance again when playing around with the aspect ratio. The images look similar, but still completely different. The final verdict for landscapes is that you can use any aspect ratio and it will most likely look good. Number 3, tree. In a 1:1 aspect ratio the trees look okay to me. I am not getting a wow effect from them. There also seems to be a signature/watermark artifact on one of these images. To be honest, in this case I preferred the old version a little bit more. It might just be the difference in the seed I used, as the seeds for the old and new versions were different. Although the trees in the new version look a little bit boring, compared to the old version they are centered better and not clipped off. The portrait ratio 2:3 looks like this. Top 2 trees look nice, but are not in the frame completely. Bottom left tree is in the frame, but has some text artifacts on it. And the final image bottom right would probably be the only one I would enlarge out of this bunch. The landscape ratio 3:2 could look better. At least there doesn't seem to be any text artifacts on the images this time. But some of the trees are clipped and almost all images have slightly noticeable borders on the edges. This is probably to be expected on some images, as Midjourney version 4 was not designed around different aspect ratios. And here we have the comparison of all aspect ratios. In my opinion, 1:1 looks best out of these, but maybe some other seed or more complex prompts would produce more interesting results. Number 4, woman. These look okay to me. A bit more painted than photographic, eyes look mostly fine and there are some nice details. Nothing looks out of the ordinary, but none of these really wow me. You probably need a different seed or a more complex prompt to get more impressive images than these. Some clipping of the hair and head does occur here, but it definitely looks better than the previous versions where you had to really work to get the eyes right. But compared to the previous version 4 release, there has been some slight improvement in the image. The old version looked a lot more painted and the teeth looked very wonky. The new version based on these images has the teeth looking a bit better. None of the women are smiling, so it's hard to tell. The aspect ratio of a portrait does look good with an actual portrait. The images look slightly sharper. Bottom left image looks otherwise very good, except the skin on the neck looks a little weird if you look closely. Again, some clipping does occur, but it doesn't look too bad. And the aspect ratio of a landscape. I would probably not upscale any of these images. All the heads are cut off from the top, most of the eyes look weird, and there's even slightly and not so slightly noticeable borders on the sides. In conclusion, the portrait aspect ratio looks best for a portrait of a woman in my opinion. Although I am not super happy about any of them. Let's just move on. Number 5, animal. When I first saw these, I was blown away. They look so good to me. I like that there's so much variation, as in there's different animals on each image. And I just noticed that it's kind of strange that all images on this seed do not have a nature background, but you can easily add that in your prompt. The old version did look nice as well, although it did lean heavy towards different species of felines. Now the quality has improved and the animals look a bit otherworldly on occasion with cool effects. They wow me, but I don't necessarily know if this is a good thing. Also, there seems to be more elephants now. I really love the portrait aspect ratio too. I would upscale all of these without hesitation and hang them on my wall. And landscape aspect ratio also features some really cool images. 2 elephants splashing in the water, 1 firegoat and 1 image with very angry looking lion and birds. Yet again, I would upscale all of them. When comparing all the aspect ratios, it is clear that Midjourney 4 new update really excels at generating awesome pictures of animals. All of these look great, no matter what aspect ratio is used. Number 6, architecture. These images look very cool. I love it that the architecture does not look at all traditional, but futuristic and awesome. The 1:1 aspect ratio images all look good, no artifacts, and the buildings are nicely centered in the frame, no clipping. The old version did have some nice curved lines, but the images looked quite blurry and grainy, not very nice. Also, the old version did not have a single building in the center of the image like the new version. The old version looked very chaotic and clipped off. The images really have improved. The portrait aspect ratio also looks very nice. Again, I would upscale all of the images without any doubts. I bet this would give a lot of inspiration to architects. These look really awesome with nice curved lines. And the landscape ratio. I'm not that happy with these images. It's cool that there's some cityscape showing in these and the houses themselves look cool, but there's a lot of clipping going on and some weird borders. So to compare them all, I really did like the 1:1 aspect ratio and 2:3 aspect ratio. If you want nice looking architecture pictures in the default style, you probably should not use the landscape ratio. Maybe some additional prompts improve the composition of the image, but portrait and square are the way to go with architecture in my opinion. Number 7. Flower. Moving on to flowers. The square aspect ratio looks really nice. The flowers look a little bit alien, very intricate and detailed. It brings me a lot of joy looking at these flowers. Maybe the colors are a bit muted and unnatural, but I don't care. When comparing the old version, I think that the clipping has gotten better and there is a lot more detail in the new version. A noticeable improvement. Portrait aspect ratio looks very nice as well. There actually seems to be a little bit more color. No significant clipping is going on. I would definitely upscale all of these images. And landscape aspect ratio looks nice as well. Not too much clipping and no annoying borders. Well, maybe some very thin lines on the edges of the images, but that can be easily cropped out or fixed with other tools. Again, I would probably upscale all of these images. So in conclusion, the flowers in the new version of Midjourney 4 look very awesome no matter which aspect ratio you use. All are so good. Number 8. Statue. Statues look like statues. Maybe some NSFW clothing going on for one of them, but looking nice. I added statue to my test prompts, because in earlier versions I used it a lot to get nicer looking images or very cool weird stuff when combined with different kinds of punk or core styles. Midjourney version 4 default at least looks like very normal looking statues. Nicely intricate though. Compared to the old version, there's less clipping of heads in the new version. And a lot more details on the statues. Portrait aspect ratio looks fine. There seems to be some Lysa Arryn from Game of Thrones TV show theme going on in the upper left image. And bottom right image has some really great muscles and a luscious beard. Overall the aspect ratio looks good for statues. Landscape ratio is something else. Most heads are clipped off. At least this time the female statues are fully dressed and male statues are showing off their muscles. So yeah, if you need or want to generate images of statues, square and portrait aspect ratios look nice. I would not use landscape ratio for statues. Number 9. Emblem. Emblems are a new thing I tried with Midjourney version 4 update, and I don't have any comparison images to the old version for the next 3 themes as well. I added this in the hopes of getting some nice compositions for t-shirt designs. Out of these 4, I would probably go for only the bottom right. The other versions looks cool, but they have some unintelligible text written on them. The portrait version does not really flatter the emblems. All of them are clipped off from the edges, strange text going on. The upper ones would look really nice if they were fully inside the frame. You could always edit out the weird text and replace it with something, but it's difficult to fix the clipping. And the landscape version has the same issue, but the clipping happens on the top and the bottom for basically all of the images. I would not necessarily use any of these emblems, but the square ratio does have some promise. The designs do look really cool, so with some other prompts, this could help design some awesome stuff. Number 10. Logo. Too bad Midjourney is unable to include intelligible text on logos. These would look really awesome. Most of these have some text on it, maybe needs some additional excluding and playing around with the prompt to get stuff you could actually use somewhere. Portrait ratio has some awesome designs, but again the clipping and the odd text ruins everything for these. Landscape ratio doesn't really give any additional benefits. It does feature some different cool designs. The upper right one does actually look like it's possible to change out the faces LLA Ratsi in it, and it's actually not clipped. The best result is again with the square aspect ratio, but it's difficult to actually use any of these logo designs. Let's hope the next version of Midjourney brings some improvements to stuff like this. Number 11. Skull. I added skulls into the mix because I thought they could produce some cool stuff. And based on this, I was right. The result is something very intricate and detailed. Would look awesome on a t-shirt. Portrait aspect ratio looks awesome as well. No clipping, nice details and very intricate. There does seem to be some text artifact in the top right image. Otherwise looks very good. Although the skulls themselves look very cool, they are similar to the other aspect ratios. However, all of the skulls are clipped in this aspect ratio. So in conclusion, skulls look very cool in the new version of Midjourney version 4. Personally, I would not use the landscape aspect ratio for skulls. Number 12, Map. And the final theme I decided to try out was maps. These maps came out really nice and cool. They almost look like 3D. They do have some unintelligible text, but that's okay, they're imaginary places anyway. In portrait ratio the maps look awesome too, some different looking stuff this time. Slight clipping is happening, but not too bad. In landscape ratio the maps mostly don't look that great. There's some weird borders and clipping. But the map of the Northern America is a surprise to me as it was not featured on any other aspect ratios. Too bad it's slightly clipped. Overall maps look cool and intricate, maybe they may even have some use cases for something. I would use square or portrait aspect ratio again for these. So there we have 12 themes in different aspect ratios. Which ones did you like best? Are you eager to try these out yourself? If you like this content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel for more videos like this. Let's continue prompting.